Hey, this is Nerion, and welcome to my very first episode of Second Take. In this series, we go back and we have actually a look at some of the games I've completed on my channel before. In this short review series, we will also take a look at gameplay, visuals, sound, and story, and I'll give my sort of final verdict at the very end about my overall thoughts on the game and my experience playing it. In today's review, we have a look at Call of Cthulhu, one of the very first games I managed to complete on my channel, and it was released back in 2018 by Focus Home Interactive and developed by Cyanide Studio. The game actually came out on the PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and in the following year, Nintendo Switch. The game was built on the Unreal Engine 4 at the time, and definitely felt like it was a strong continuation on from a previous popular title in the Lovecraftian world by the name of Dark Corners of the Earth. So let's have a look at the gameplay. Now, at the time, I didn't really think the gameplay was that bad, but thinking about it now, there were definitely areas that it could have used some improvement on. I had seen some footage of earlier development where the actual skill point system was a lot more layered and had a bit more depth to it than its final iteration. Now, despite the fact that I was very familiar with Lovecraft in the fact that I've played the tabletop game, I don't know if many people would enjoy the way that they approached the gameplay mechanics in regards to utilizing your skills, as everything was basically a dice roll, even down to spot hidden. Now, spot hidden was a very interesting skill, which is also present in the tabletop game, where it increases your chance of finding hidden items. So that means that even with a very high amount of points in this skill, it wasn't guaranteed that if you go into a room you were going to find all the hidden items, because it would be predetermined with the dice roll on whether you would find them based on your current skill. Now, for me, this wasn't too much of a bother because I've actually familiar with the system, as I said, and I thought it was an interesting way to approach this game with applying the same methods. So I actually enjoyed it. Although it was a little frustrating at times when, lock picking was entirely based on your investigation skill. I would have much preferred to have some sort of little mini game where you had to fiddle with the lock to unlock it, with a chance that, if you tried to force it too hard, you would end up breaking your lockpick. But again, this is a very minor thing that I can overlook, and again, the gameplay itself was challenging. At times, going through the stealth sections was quite stressful. Trying to ascertain the path of the NPCs, but after some time and persistence, I was able to push through, and the gameplay was thoroughly enjoyable. It didn't feel like it took anything away. It might not have been the best system that they could have come up with, but I don't think that this was a sort of AAA title that had that sort of budget in regards to the development. So overall, I thought the gameplay was really good. So when I look back and I think about the visuals of the game, it had a very sort of dark undertone, macabre style, and then it had the strange sort of film grain overlay as well throughout the game. A lot of these settings you can't turn off. You can disable the motion blur, which is something I always disable in games. So I was very quick to turn that off, as for me it just generally puts me off when playing any game with the motion blur. In most cases I find that it's overdone. So that was sort of my main criticism when it came to like the visuals of the game. But in general, that is the same for most games I play when it comes to the motion blur. Now, throughout the game, I've noticed, like any great Cthulhu game, there are lots of dark tones of green and teal, like those sort of colors stand out, and of course the magical lanterns. So there aren't really magical lanterns in this game, but throughout the game There are lanterns just dotted about in locations, in buildings, in rooms, and every single one had this magical aura with like this mist surrounding them, and I could have sworn at the very beginning of the game that they were to be used for something. Turns out they weren't. It's just, you know, when they were making the game, they decided to make these things look like they were from, you know, from another world almost. But aside from that, you know, overall the game is very visually appealing. Now, despite the fact that it was made in 2018, it's definitely not the most detailed, maybe not the most detailed, but not the most realistic looking game. It definitely feels like it was made, you know, several years earlier. Like, it doesn't really feel like it came from out of, you know, that year of 2018. And I don't know whether that's due to the budget, but like I say, it wasn't the most realistic looking game compared to other titles that were available at the time. With the mix of everything else and the overall visual tone they went for with the game, it really jumped out at me, and I really felt like I was just pulled into another Lovecraftian world. And at the same time, it also felt like a true successor to Dark Corners of the Earth, and that was a very memorable game for me as well. If you haven't seen that, definitely try it out. Now, sound. Yes, I mean, I probably harp on about this every single review that I've done so far, not just on here, but, well, this is my first episode, but not just on my First Take series, but sound is very important. And if done incorrectly, it can really make or break a game. And I'm not just talking about just ambient sound, but comes down to sort of the music, the voice acting, everything you hear when you're in the game. Just random sounds, banging of pipes in the background, that sort of thing. So when I say that, I'm thinking back to games like Dead Space. You know, when you're progressing through the game and you hear all this sort of background noise, the clanking of pipes, is there a monster around the corner? Especially when you're playing these type of games by yourself and you're being sort of sucked into this world and you're not really paying attention to anything else that's going on around you, especially if you're playing this at nighttime. And there was definitely times where this was very stressful. You know, there is a particular creature that shows up during this game that you have to, it's basically a chase and run sequence. And yeah, that definitely had my heart pounding quite a bit, trying to get away from that. And I felt like their approach to, you know, their design as well on some of the creatures and like other things that have come from the world of Lovecraft was done really well. You know, everyone's got their own interpretation, and I felt that they did a great job of capturing that, especially with the use of the overall ambience and the sounds, the music. The voice acting was amazing. So the main actor, Anthony Howell, who voices the main character, he also did the main character on Vampire, and he did a fantastic job. Every voice actor was great, even down to the people in the pub that were singing drinking songs that all looked like they were related. And again, I don't think there are many horror games out there where you can really fault voice acting. I feel like that's probably one of the main things in most horror games that gets a lot of love, and this one definitely does. Yeah, a perfect use of sound along with the visuals and timing. I mean, timing the tempo change as well. You know, when you're skulking through an asylum or, you know, going through some kind of strange dream sequence. You know, it was executed really well, and I thoroughly enjoyed just being sucked and pulled into that world, and, you know, not really thinking about anything else. You know, if you're like me and you're passionate about the world of Lovecraft, I mean, it definitely sinks its teeth into you, and yeah, it hooks you really good. So overall, you know, I can't really fault the sound. It was done really well, even down to just the main music in the menu. It was just, you know, it was just amazing. So story, yeah, I mean, we get to the story now. The story was amazing. So in Call of Cthulhu, you take on the main character, which is Edward Pierce, who is a private investigator. Now, like with any Lovecraftian story, the main character is a sort of washed up private investigator with a dark past, usually some form of alcoholism or, drug addiction, trying to drown their problems, thrust into a really difficult situation. So in this game, you are investigating the tragic death of the Hawkins family, which takes place on the Darkwater Island. But as you soon discover, there is much more afoot than what meets the eye. It isn't just the strange portraits that have been painted by Mrs. Hawkins, but it's also the crazy doctor in the asylum and a secret cult on the island that are all involved some way or another. And throughout the story, you feel like you're being pulled in different directions. You never know which one's going to come next. So it does sometimes get a little disorientating with the story, sort of what you should be focusing on next. But again, I think that overall it felt like it really linked well together. Like everything came together at the end. It's just like a great story and a great movie where you're following maybe 3 different characters. Although you're only following Pearson, there's you're picking up tidbits of information, interesting lore, and maybe reading the local newspapers on the island and getting sort of a background history on what's happened on the island before. So there's lots of interesting cryptic clues and tidbits of information to sort of flesh out this world. And again, as someone who is already big fan of the world of Lovecraft, there was an abundance of information and lore at my disposal to sink my teeth into. And as I also do run my own game for tabletop Call of Cthulhu, it just gave me even more ammunition at my disposal for things to use in my own games as well. The story itself was done really well. I only managed to play through 2 different endings. There are 4 different endings in the game. There's a really good ending, which I think I did unlock, but I didn't play through it. I went for the slightly more spicier endings. I won't really cover sort of exactly what happens. I would recommend either playing through it yourself or watching my playthrough, but it's definitely worth it. And if you're a fan of even Stephen King, who was heavily influenced by Lovecraft in his writing, I would also recommend checking out this title as well. So now we get to the final verdict. So yeah, I know I didn't really do a scoring system on this, but if I was to use my scoring system from first take, it would be a 3 out of 3 across the board. I loved the whole thing. The game definitely has some faults. It's not 100% perfect, but as far as ticking all the boxes for what I look for in a horror game, especially Lovecraft horror, it stood up to the challenge and it succeeded in every single one. So I can't really fault it, honestly. It's a bit strange sitting here sort of doing a review by myself, and I've had a few attempts of trying to do this review. So, as it being my first review, I appreciate any feedback, anything you'd like me to see done differently. If you feel like the reviews should be a little bit longer, a bit shorter. But hopefully you've enjoyed this sort of second take at Call of Cthulhu. And if you actually watched my playthrough, give me your thoughts on how you felt about the game, if you played it yourself. What did you feel could have been done better? Yes, there is definitely things that could have been improved down to sort of visually, the mechanics. There's areas in the game that could have been improved, but it didn't ruin the game for me. It didn't ruin my overall experience, and it's definitely a game that I will always have fond memories of, just like the much older title Dark Corners of the Earth. So yeah, just let me know what you think. And while you're here, like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell to receive more updates on future content from myself. And check me out on Twitch, links in the description. I do streams and horror streams. Every Friday we do our Friday horror, and then usually on Sundays and Wednesdays I do a regular playthrough of a title, which currently I just finished Metro last night, and I'm looking to dive into the potentially Witcher 3 next, I believe. And with our Friday horror streams right now, we're working on the Amnesia Rebirth, another amazing horror game. Anyway, Thanks for joining me on this second take of Call of Cthulhu, and we will see you in the next one. I have once again been a non-professional gamer, and that's a wrap.